Look, as you're aware, the United States has today announced a new tariff regime which increases tariffs on New Zealand goods entering the US from 10 to 15%. This is a disappointing development. New Zealand and the US have a deep and long-standing friendship, and US exporters already face much lower tariffs exporting to New Zealand than goods going the other way. Minister McClay and officials have taken every opportunity to point out that to their US counterparts since President Trump's first tariff announcement in April. However, it appears New Zealand has been impacted by a very blunt formula which does not take account of the low tariffs we impose on US products. Instead, the blunt formula simply says that countries which export more to the US than they import will face higher tariff rates. Currently, New Zealand does export slightly more to the US than it imports, although the reverse has also been the case at several points in recent years. So we will be talking to our friends in the United States about that. Today, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been meeting with the US Embassy representative on this matter, and our Washington Embassy will also be meeting with its counterparts, and ministers will give consideration to what engagements we can usefully make. On the positive side, we do need to remember the broader context here, which is that our exporters continue to do well. New Zealand exports rose 11.4% in the 12 months to June, and exports to the US increased 6.3% over that period. Commodity prices have also been at near record highs for much of the year. Until now, the experience of many businesses affected by US tariffs has been that they've been able to pass on the additional tariff costs, or at least some of those costs, to buyers. We will have to see what the impact of this latest development is, but I expect that some of those companies will probably now redouble their efforts to develop and explore other markets. The government, for our part, will continue our work to support those exporters with good information. We will continue our work to open up new markets around the world and to pursue good trade into those countries with whom we already have free trade arrangements, and we will continue to represent New Zealand's case for a better deal with the US. I will now hand over to Todd to say a few words about how we're responding to this development, and then we'll take questions.
Well, Nicola, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcement today is not surprising. As we've said over the last short period of time, there have been signals out of the US that there was likely to be a change, that New Zealand could be impacted by that. As Nicola has said, it's just a formula that's been used that says a list of countries that sell more to the US than they buy from the US have had 15% or in some cases higher placed upon them. Our exporters to date have weathered the increase of 10% tariffs extremely well. In talking to many of them, the larger ones, as Nicola has said, they've either been able to pass the cost on and absorb it, or have made choices themselves about other markets that give them greater certainty, or they might get a better return. At 15%, an additional 5% makes that more challenging for them, but there is still confidence in their ability in that market to provide the high quality goods that New Zealand produces. The trade deficit that we have, or the surplus against against the US, is quite modest compared to the size of the US economy, around $500 million based on 9 billion New Zealand dollars worth of exports. You will note or will have seen that Australia sits at 10% and New Zealand is now at 15%. That's because Australia actually imports more from the US than they sell them. In as far as exports are concerned, though, this is not the first time we've faced additional competition in that market from others in Australia. Of course, before President Trump came to office, Australia had a trade agreement where predominantly they were at 0% tariff rate for the many things that we compete against. When he made his announcements of the 10% a short while ago, Australia went to the 10%, the same as us, and now we're seeing a short space in that. We have engaged both here in New Zealand today with the US Embassy. Our officials in Washington have been keeping in constant contact with their counterparts, and the United States Trade Representative Office. I have asked, they've put in a formal request on our behalf for me to have a call with Ambassador Greer, and I've also sent a message to him requesting that, so that we can talk about the difference of their approach, the harm that we think it will do, not only to trade, but also to consumers in the US, and to seek the ability to talk about how we can reduce this additional 5% to support New Zealand exporters.